Okay. Thank you very much for coming. Before the defense, I thought that it would be great to talk about what I was actually doing in the past 5 years. And it's not something which is widely known, or it's not the basics are not even taught in the research master program. So it's basically a theoretical research. And what I would like to do is to show you what are the applications. So the title is Essay on Bid Rigging. Bid rigging is simply a cartel agreement in an auction setting. So it's basically like the normal cartels. It's an agreement on the price. Imagine a procurement process like the government would like to build a bridge. And they invite bidders for a tender. They submit the bids. This is what we would like to expect, that is competitive, right? The problem with cartels is that simply they are agreements in order to manipulate the price. They can obtain in a procurement auction a higher price, which is bad for taxpayers, it's bad for everyone. These are criminals. This is making procurement process more expensive, and this is public money. And why is that important? That actually we are talking about a huge amount of money. So this is in developed countries. This is about 10–15% of GDP. This is for OECD countries. For instance, only in Germany, this is 400 billion euros. This is the affected market. And within that, actually, bidding rings are very widespread. There are some estimates on how prevalent they are. The only countrywide estimate we know is that in Japan, which is also a fairly developed country, about 20% of public procurement is affected by bidding rings, so they are not competitive. And this is a huge problem. They make huge damage for the public and for taxpayers. And technically, this is a crime. Also in Europe, Japan, and according to US competition law, these people who participate in a cartel, so also in a bidding ring, they can end up in jail. This is a criminal offense. So what we can talk about is this is widespread, it's very damaging, and it's a criminal activity. But these are not the kind of criminals you expect. So when you hear the word cartel, this is what you're expecting, fairly violent guys having guns. No, the truth is that this is a classical white-collar crime. So, this is basically a kind of an illegal business meeting. And it's done by businessmen. So actually, this is what we can expect. A nice handshake, a meeting on a conference. The weirdest place I've seen was a sauna. There are lots of settings you can imagine, but nevertheless, it looks very friendly. And what I'm doing is that basically my research gives something about how to prevent them, right? And fighting cartels, if you think about it, this is what you have in mind, right? Again, violence against violence, and the truth couldn't be less cool. I'm doing the same thing as most of you guys. This is basically just research, theoretical research and laboratory experiment. You can imagine both. Nevertheless, this is about setting the rules. The actual setting is to tell the government how to organize a tender. And this is basically about procedural rules. My research gives hints about how to set up these rules. And basically, yeah, this is what it looks like. Again, it's an office job, like theirs, but they are criminals, and I'm an economist. I'm the good guy here, okay? So please support me. Let's go back to the bridge example. This setting, although it looks simple, you ask for the bids and you choose the highest one. But actually, the procedure is complicated. And about many of them, economists have a say on how to do it. Just a couple of examples. What is the auction mechanism? How much the winner should pay? What are the procedural rules? Do you invite the participants, or anyone can participate? Is there a pre-registration process? How many people are allowed to participate? These are all procedural rules which affect the outcome. What I'm interested in is how to handle information given to the bidders. The only common feature between these tenders when it comes to procedural rules, that there is a winner. The best bid wins. But all the details matter. So there are the big examples. There are timing effects when to invite the bidders. Who is eligible? what is the final price they have to pay? But again, the last step, which I'm interested in, is how to give information to the bidders. Imagine the bridge example. There, the government also have cost estimates. Do you want to disclose this to the bidders or not? When do you disclose it and how? Do you give them all the information? And here comes my question. What would you do? You have a cost estimate about the bridge, how much would it cost? You are the government. Would you disclose this information? Would you give them the estimates? And here there is a traditional premise, which is reflected in the regulation and also EU competition law, which is the following. If you disclose information publicly, you give them this cost estimate, then it helps them to give a better estimate on their own costs. And actually, they will have a more precise bids, a more precise price offer. The idea here is efficiency. In an economic sense, it means that the winner should be the one who has the lowest costs. And disclosing information helps. And this is something which has been confirmed in literature several times, and this is the principle transparency, which is in EU now and also in US competition law. My added value is that this is true unless they coordinate their bids. This also helps them. So how does a cartel work? Typically it looks like this, that the potential winner approaches the others that, look, if you submit a serious bid, I will win anyway. But if you submit a serious bid, I need to do it cheap. Let's make a deal. You do not submit a serious bid, I win anyway, and I pay you money. Or I invite you for my own tenders, I subcontract you. It works. And actually, the idea behind this, that if you disclose the information, you make this easier. Because it's simply easier to identify the best bidder, not just for the government, but also for the cartel members. Everything is credible, everything works, and you make it smooth. And if a cartel is formed, then we are in a huge trouble, the price goes up tremendously. So there are two effects, and my added value is that the second effect is something which my thesis points out, and this means that there are no clear answers in this question. One has to consider how likely that a cartel would form, and then it can provide an answer. Okay, this was my introduction talk, my Lekenpraatje. Thank you very much, and in a couple of minutes we will start with the defense itself. Thank you. So do I have time for a quick? Do I have time? Okay.
Het cortège. Mag ik u verzoeken te gaan staan? Please rise.
This session with a prayer. May the spirit of wisdom and mercy grow and blossom in all of us. Please be seated. I welcome you all at this academic session on the occasion of the public PhD defense of the dissertation Essays on Bid Rigging of Julia Ceres. I now give the floor to the first opponent, Professor Ray from the University of Toulouse-Capitole in the Toulouse School of Economics.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to start with a general question that applies to the various chapters of your thesis, which is about the role of information and communication. So the nice insight that you are focusing throughout the thesis is that an auctioneer may want to control the amount of information that is given to the various bidders, and this is a nice and new insight in the literature. I was wondering, there are various ways in which you could think of this information, this communication between the auctioneer and the various bidders. You focus on one particular dimension, which is the degree of uncertainty captured by the variance of the information or the uncertainty that the bidders are facing, and therefore you're focusing on comparative statics with respect to this variance. There are probably many different ways in which the information available to the auctioneer could affect if it were to be made available to the bidders, would affect their updated beliefs. You focus on this particular dimension. I was wondering, first, what did you choose to model it this way? And second, could you think of other ways and other possible implications of those other ways on your result? In other words, how does the particular way of modeling this information or this communication, to what extent does it affect the insight, or can you explore what you would think, you would expect if you were to model this information communication in other ways? Let me note in passing that, for example, in the particular context of the second chapter of your thesis, where you focus on discrete numbers, then clearly an alternative way of modeling the information would be to add another signal that is available to the auctioneer, and that could be passed or not passed on to the bidders. Clearly, this will not affect the variance in the same way. So that's.
Thank you very much for the question. I would like to answer your question in several units, because the way I interpreted, you asked 2 or 3 different questions. So the first one, I understand you are asking me why did I come up with this idea, and what are basically the application, why is this relevant? What I have in mind is mainly procurement auctions. And the form I'm thinking about is better to capture with an example. So, but I think I also mentioned in my thesis, what I have in mind is a construction procurement. The government would like to make an object, a building or a bridge built. And in that case, there are basically, we can categorize the information asymmetry in 2 ways. There are the 2 standard ways, private values and common values. Private values could be ones which are firm-specific, access to credit, experience with the type of projects, how many times I built that kind of building. The other type could be something which is more project-related, which is affected by all bidders. So I think about certain costs of inputs, for instance, availability of technology, which are factors which affect the price and affect all bidders alike. And when it comes to the role of the auctioneer, in this case, the buyer, that the buyer typically has cost estimates, for instance. So there's this tender. The government most certainly makes a cost estimates on it. Now the practical question is whether to disclose it. And in my understanding, this is a policy question, and the way I modeled it is that this public revelation of this kind of information reduces the uncertainty about the common values of the common value term. And this was the main idea of the model choice. To your second question, how to expand this. What I've been working on this year or recently is to expand it to a more general setting. So one can think about a repeated setting. So in procurement auctions, the bidders meet several times, and they can infer about their types just by the bets. There is a bidder, even strategically or non-strategically, is a strong bidder, so submits more better bets. In this case, in a procurement auction, lower bets. Then I can infer about that bidder's private information, and most importantly about the private value type. I can learn how good that bidder is, and that affects auctions later, so later tenders. So what I would like to say is that depending, for instance, on the disclosure policy, there is a similar but differently working effect by which the uncertainty about the private value is eliminated. And finally, why did I choose this particular model? I would say that both the model you suggested, which comes from the Milgram and Weber model, is a relevant tool. This model is actually, my model is actually achieving the same intuition. So this was a particular model choice which could represent these ideas, and I think they are both equally applicable to this kind of problem.
To be specific, so in the context of the second chapter, where the common value can take can have any two levels, the comparative statistics is about the magnitude of those levels. But if you were to build this into a broader model in which there is ex-ante uncertainty about the distribution from which you are going to draw this common value, and the auctioneer has some information about this, there is no way, I believe, that you could reconcile this with the particular comparative statistics exercise on the variance, on the magnitude of the model. That being said, the qualitative insights about the variance may well carry over. Are you saying that in the other paper, they did that exercise and they showed that providing an additional signal has the same impact on the ability to collude as in your chapter?
The way I interpret your question is that actually there is a limitation of the model in the second chapter. What I think is that in the context of the third chapter, so the other theory chapter, that model has numerically the same properties, so it is possible to derive technically identical results, and that doesn't have that weakness. So my answer to the question would be that to the hypothesis, the two models are equivalent. But if I have to choose and to other type of questions I'm examining in the third chapter, the other model performs better.
Thank you.
I would now like to give the floor to the second opponent, Professor Offerman from the University of Amsterdam.
Dear candidate, let me first congratulate you with a very fine piece of work. I thought that it's quite outstanding that there's 2 solo-authored papers in a thesis that are of impressive quality. I also like the experimental chapter a lot. Methodologically, I like it a lot that you combine theory and experiments, and I think that this is the best way to proceed. I also contribute to that type of work, and I think it's quite natural that you find quite some tension between experimental results and theoretical results. And I want you to think a little bit more about that in what I'm going to say. So a central proposition in your thesis is that that contrary to the auction literature on competitive auctions, you find that common value uncertainty may actually be good for the seller. if there is a possibility that bidders collude. And the intuition is that with common value uncertainty, incentive compatibility of the cartel mechanism may break down, and that may make collusion harder. Your result is surprising, but it is intuitive in a rational world. In the real world, people may be less rational and maybe boundedly rational, and I would like to speculate or to think a little bit about what could happen to the predictions of your model if you would allow for such possibilities. So there's two ingredients that come to my mind. So I think that in the real world, many people have some aversion to lying, right? So they are somewhat less inclined to cheat in their talking than the rational model would predict. And the second possibility is that people care a lot about fairness, right? So also when I read your experimental results, I get the idea that in the knockout process, they focus more on fairness of the outcome, you know, that they focus more on dividing the potential surplus that's out there. Right? So I would like you to think about how that, if you would include ingredients like that in your model, if you could say something about whether or not that's going to change the central proposition of your thesis.
Thank you very much for the feedback. It depends highly on technical details, I would say. So in practical, if I do not want to go far away from the example we had before, disclosed information can be in many ways. So imagine the following situation: that there is an input which 3 participants might use. If the third bidder doesn't use it, you use it extensively, and I use it in moderate amounts. If we have a look at the structure, clearly this is some kind of an intermediate, a quasi-common value. So this is a kind of approach from which someone can look at this. The additional complication is whether the signals are credible. So whether they can confirm the validity of the claims, or it's just cheap talk. So I would say the way I would approach it is, at first glance, is definitely would be experimental. And again, which was visible from the experimental outcomes, indeed there is a fairness component. Now the additional question is whether rings are formed endogenously or exogenously. Suppose it's endogenous. Okay. In that case, actually it's making the incentive compatibility constraints less binding, which means it's actually strengthening the ring. And this might be something to lead the way to the answer of the hypothesis. If they are allowed to choose about collusion, to make a decision about collusion ex ante, so after they learn their types, which is more realistic, why do high types do not engage in collusion, and why low types do? So I do not have a complete answer to your question. I can present these ideas by which I would start to look for an answer. So I would start with endogenous cartel formation, indeed with preferences regarding distribution. And my hypothesis is that would strengthen the cartel. This would be the first step. So we would observe more cartels in practice.
That was good.
Your position continues as Dr. Argenton from Tilburg University.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dear candidate, I'd like to congratulate you on submitting a fine piece of doctoral work. Over the years, I've seen you become both more precise and more concerned with the relevance of your work, so it's a pleasure today to be here and, by challenging both the precision and the relevance of your work, to offer you an opportunity for defending it. My first question relates to the 2 theoretical chapters of your dissertation, so that's chapters 2 and 3. In both chapters, the interaction takes place during a single period, and you model collusion as a bid coordination mechanism that is essentially a revelation game where cartelists are induced to reveal their reservation value for the object for sale by comparing the payoffs from being selected or not as a lead bidder against various side payments. My question is simple. What are we talking about here? In most countries, explicit collusion is illegal and often, especially in the context of procurement, criminally sanctioned. So contracts to this effect are void. Wherefrom, therefore, does the bidding ring derive the commitment power associated to side payments? How, in practice, can cartelists believe that other ring members will be happy to honor the promise to make payments when they cannot sign enforceable contracts to this effect? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I can give you a practical answer. So from the auction cases, I've seen how did they do it, and this also reflects in the literature. In practice, the timing is the key. So in a single unit auction, in the cases which I also referred, what happened is that the agreement about the side payments was made before, and also the side payment was submitted earlier. In that cases, the other possible way, which is technically the same, that ex ante we make a contract about the about the subcontract, which is a very practical and an important way on how to implement this. And the idea here is that collusion is illegal, but subcontracting is not. So we make simply a contract about sharing the work. We split. If it's legally not possible, then obviously this is an obstacle. The other way they can do it, but this is a more complicated setting. When they know each other, there is a repeated setting. The reason I did not consider repeated settings, and well, the way I would think it raises different questions, because in a repeated setting, it's possible to make a bit rotation. I win once, you win once. In repeated settings, the way we do it is that they do the bid rotation, they make an agreement on who to win when. If it doesn't boil down, then in the end they make a clearing. So if there is some imbalance, which always happens, in the end they make the clearing and they try to hide the transactions in some way. In the cases I've seen, this worked out pretty well. In another case, which was studied by Asker, which is a slightly different setting, stamp collector auctions, in which highly valued stamps were auctions. The way they did it is that the clearinghouse was an outsider. It was strange, it was a taxi driver. So they submitted the bids, they give everything to the taxi driver who handled anything and delivered the person who submitted the bids instead of the bidders, and they combined it with other methods, including shield bidding, for instance. I think these are the ways how can they implement this in practice. And the reason I limited this because although the timing of my models are restrictive and do not necessarily reflect this practical side of these markets, they convey the message, and I believe that we would get similar results if we would directly model these practices.
I would now like to give the floor to Professor Potters from Tilburg University.
Dear candidate, I agree with the previous speakers that this is a fine thesis. I've read it with great pleasure. I think it's theoretically very challenging. It challenges also received wisdom in auction theory, which is always very nice in a sense, and it's also potentially practically relevant and important. So I think these are features of a thesis which are much to be praised. So I have a question actually about the experimental chapter, chapter 4, in which you test the hypothesis that under certain circumstances in which there's both private and common value components, that collusion may actually improve efficiency, right? So that's the hypothesis that you test in this chapter. and you find that it actually doesn't, right? So you say, well, you know, it doesn't actually improve efficiency. And then of course you try to find out why it doesn't, and then you find that, you know, even though they reveal information, they update information, that one of the main reasons, as you say, the main reason for the efficiency puzzle is that the low effect of the own private value signal on the knockout bidding strategy, right? So they use bidding strategies which are not, suboptimal in that sense. And then you say, well, you know, it's a bit of a both. So why do they do that? And then in the conclusions you say, well, you know, maybe this allocation mechanism acts, literally you say, maybe this allocation mechanism acts as a trigger to a different emotional state, right? So that's sort of your potential explanation for why they use these strategies. So I would like you to expand a bit on this speculation. So first of all, is there any other evidence in the literature that certain allocation mechanisms may, erase or induce different emotional states? So if so, then I'd like to hear this from you, if so. And another is that, in fact, you have a bit of information to actually test this, because you have this control treatment in which you do not allow for collusion, and there's no knockout auction, and still people are predicted to use similar strategies, right? So you could actually compare how the strategies that they use in the knockout auction, how they compare to the estimated strategies that they use in the auction where there's no collusion allowed. So did you look at that and compare these two? So that could give you a handle on whether indeed there's something, you know, different emotional states or whatever, if there's any difference in the strategies that they use in these two sorts of treatments. So I was wondering whether you looked at this, and if so, what the result was, and if not, why not?
Right. Thank you very much for the feedback and the question. So I would say that based on the data we have, it would be hard to control for that. And I have now a more different belief regarding why did this happen. So emotional state could be something which influenced their behavior. Something we cannot test for because we did not apply facial recognition software. It would be technically feasible, but we do not have the data. Another one which would be feasible in another setting, and I find this more credible, is rationality. So what happened, and I need to go back to the design, bidders had 90 seconds to communicate, to potentially make an agreement, and submit their knockout bid. And I recently got a feedback regarding this after I submitted my thesis. So this is basically a potential explanation that the time limit caused this effect. And it also explained why we observe some level of rationality there. The bids are not completely random, right? So there are two effects they should take into consideration, altogether three. There are 4 information signals possessed by them, which are ex ante not known. Their own private values, 2 values, and their own common value signals. And in this respect, they behave rationally, because the coefficient estimates regarding the 3 which are relevant to their valuation were taken into account, so that coefficients are significant. On the other hand, what puzzles us is that the coefficient estimates are low, much lower than predicted. And this is consistent with simply that the bidders had limited time. And this didn't change much in time, so there was no significant or powerful time effect. Bidders did not learn about this, possibly because there was not enough number of periods in which they could experience how collusion works. An average bidder participated in 6 bidding rings. So simply, my answer would be that it's a flaw in the design, but there is no obvious design, no obvious idea how to improve the design, because there is a trade-off. If we increase the time for the collusion stage in which they can communicate and submit the knockout bids, then we need to reduce the number of rounds. We had altogether 11 rounds, which we believe it's sufficient, and going below is not necessarily a good idea. and an average session took 110 minutes. So these are more, I would say this is more like a design flaw, and I do not see a way how to test this with the data we have.
If I can do a brief follow-up, but you have the data in the control treatment where they cannot collude, where they are under maybe less time pressure, right? So they also have to submit the same sort of strategy. So you could estimate strategies for that treatment and see how they compare to those in the ones where they are potentially under time pressure and simply compare coefficients, or doesn't that work for some reason?
Mm-hmm. I see. Well, in that case, the ones engaging in collusion had a certain time limit, and those who were in treatments allowing for collusion had precisely, and they didn't engage in collusion, had precisely the same setting than those in treatment in which collusion was precluded. I still do not directly see a way on how to address this.
I would like to give the floor again to Professor Ray for a second question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, dear candidate, let me first take this opportunity to stress how much I enjoyed reading this thesis. I had the pleasure of hearing a first version of one of your papers a couple of years ago, and I had been impressed then. I've not been disappointed when I read the thesis. So you should understand my question as trying to encourage you. I think there is a great potential as a researcher in you, and you should therefore interpret my question as encouraging you to push further the boundaries. In the you have a particular way of so you have a negative result in chapter 3 of your thesis, expressing the view that if you insist on direct revelation mechanisms that make full use of the reported information, it's impossible for the bidders to form a ring, to a bidding ring, bid rigging cartel if there is common value among them on top of the private value. And then you move on and say, however, a more limited form of communication among the potential cartel members may allow for some collusion. More limited, possibly, but some collusion. So this suggests that either the revelation principle does not hold, or more probably that making a limited use of the reported information is probably more effective from the point of view of the cartel members than insisting on making full use of the information, which in turn calls for the next step, which would be what is the most effective way or the best way ever for the cartel members to make use of this reported information. So you have focused on two particular ways, and one doesn't work, the other one does work. But then, could we have a broader picture of the set of feasible mechanisms and the most effective one, the most profitable one for the bidders?
Thank you very much for your feedback and for your question. So indeed it's relevant whether there is kind of an intermediate solution, right? So the two extreme cases considered in the paper are one in which a potential mechanism in which all private information is revealed, and one in which there is an auction in which the bidders bid according to their surplus. And surplus is defined in a way that it's basically the information, the summary of their information they know regarding their valuations. What we need there, and we also need a counterfactual, what happens if they compete. And in that respect, we have some technical difficulties, and this is one of the reasons. So there are actually two reasons. This is indeed it's very relevant, and I would like to work on it. But I would like to stress that this is actually hard work technically, because in order to have an equilibrium, even in the competitive auction, We need that, in standard auctions, so first and second price and other standard mechanisms. We need that the summary statistics exists. So the equilibrium bits are actually an increasing function of that summary statistic, if it exists. This is something which is not my result, so it's Professor Offerman's result, and also it was reconfirmed by Silva et al. That we need technical assumptions like quasi-concavity of the distribution function. What I would like to do is to start with the given technical assumptions and work with those ones, whether with the structural limitations I'm able to achieve a convincing result regarding that. And if I have that with the limited model, then I would choose a direction. So at this point, I would consider it more like a technical question, because in practice, actually these are the forms we observe. They sit down and they have a detailed discussion. Either they can commit to the information they provide or not, and it's credible, or they simply have an auction within themselves, a pre-auction, knockout, or on another format in which basically they submit a one-dimensional bid. So from practical relevance, I would say that this is important whether they could improve, and what can we expect in future bidding rings, because actually they improve their methods quite a lot. And from a technical point of view, this is relevant without any explanation. But this is how I would start.
Thank you. I certainly encourage you to indeed explore this further. Particularly the fact that this is what we see in practice is interesting, but it may be nice to have a framework that explains why this is what we see in practice.
I agree.
Second question for Professor Offerman.
Dear candidate, I want to take this opportunity to challenge some of your interpretations of your experimental results. So one thing is that I want to follow up on Professor Potter's. In response to his question, you said that maybe a flaw in your design was that bidders could not learn enough in your setup, right? So, and that maybe, you know, if they would have had the time to learn, they would have responded more to their information than they did. Right, so there's another possibility, and that is that people get a little bit upset during the negotiation phase, right? So it may be that, you know, when I'm talking to somebody else, I feel that I have the higher private value, but I find the other person to be too aggressive, right? And then one way to get even is to then bid a bit lower, you know, then I get a certain profit for sure, instead of an uncertain profit if I go on to the auction, and I hurt the other player a little bit, right? So my conjecture is that actually maybe it's not a lack of learning that drives this result, but it's more that other motivations start entering when people talk, and when people may get upset if they think that the other person is too greedy. Would you agree with that interpretation? Is there something in your data that allows you to discredit it or not?
Thank you very much for your feedback and question. There are some parts which were addressed in this. So when it comes to dynamic effects, one can consider in the treatments allowing for collusion, whether in time collusion is more or less likely. One can consider the competitive bets. One can consider the knockout bets. What was common in this feature is the lack of dynamic effects, and these are the components, the dependent variables we can observe in this setting. If it's the case what you suggest, then I would believe that in participation in the decision regarding collusion, we should observe a learning effect. But even there, we do not see anything. It's not significant. So in this respect, I think it's a relevant question, but I do not believe this would be a concern. Also, when it comes to greed, as far as I know, but though greed might affect truthfulness. So preferences regarding truth-telling. If I'm upset with respect to someone that adversely affect my preferences, and this was confirmed also in experimental literature. If that's the case, then we should also observe a learning effect in truthful relevation of their types, and again, we see no dynamic effects. So the level, the distribution of misreports in the communication of cartels do not show any changing pattern. So even if it's possible, then that there is an effect you are claiming, we see no evidence here in the data.
Okay, then I want to follow up a little bit about your intriguing results that people with a high private value tend to avoid the auction and the collusion phase and start to choose entering the auction. So my conjecture is that this may be due to bidders falling prey to the winner's curse. So that's something that we see a lot in experimental data, and you do not comment on that. Right? So I think that in your particular setup, where only 2 human bidders compete, the common value component actually increases bidders' profits, right? Well, usually with more bidders, if people fall prey to the winner's curse, the profit gets decreased, right? So if you have only 2 bidders and people ignore the information that is conveyed in winning, then given that the price is determined by the lower bidder, if this bidder bids naively, then he will bid too low, right? And that's also something that you see, that in the auction process, that people actually earn a little bit more than expected in theory. Right? So this result may be due to the low number of bidders that you have, and this may change quite a bit if you would have had more bidders in your experimental setup. So my conjecture will be that if you had more bidders in your setup, that then also the high value bidders would you know, they would enter the collusion phase because of the winner's curse. Can you comment on that?
I see. Thank you very much for the feedback. Yeah, this is something which was not addressed directly in the paper. I would say that I largely agree with what you say. So it's possible that the winner's curse affected their behavior. On the other hand, when it comes to the second part of your comment, I would say that the effect on revenue can be captured by the lack of competition. So because of what we observe in the knockout bids, the knockout bids show some lack of rationality, and this is actually which is implied by the fact that they do not take the additional information sufficiently into account. And this is why I claim we observe lower marginal effects of their information signals. In that case, what can be suggested, and this can be inferred from the estimation results, is that basically the lack of competition is implying the high values in payoffs. So what I believe is that what you claim might very well be true. It's not in the paper, and thank you very much for your comment. And on the other hand, I think the other one is addressed, and that might explain the puzzle. And there is potentially your claim might also be true. I'm not sure.
I would like to continue with Dr. Argenton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My second question concerns chapter 2 of your thesis, which shows that disclosure or information about the common value component of evaluations might not always be in the best interests of a seller, as it may foster collusion among bidders. You argue that you extend Marshall and Mark's 2007 article by considering partial cartels, that is, bidding rings that do not include all participants to the auction. However, in this setting, if I'm not mistaken, you treat non-members as robots. They are not formal players in the game, but they are instead assigned an exogenous bidding rule to which ring members actually best respond. Thus, you solve only for an equilibrium among those bid ring members. That is peculiar. In effect, you assume that ring members have correct expectations about the behavior of non-members, but the reverse is not true. In a full equilibrium analysis, non-members would know in equilibrium that a bid ring has formed and would adjust their bids accordingly, and that is, I presume, downward, but I would like your view on this. So first, what would that imply for your analysis? And second, are we wrong in the context you're looking at of a procurement to insist on full equilibrium analysis?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for your comment. First of all, in my paper, I do not necessarily consider robots. What I claim is that they play according to some strategy. It can entail that they are robots, but it can also entail that they are rational beings who are strategically replying to the existence of the ring. To reply to the second part, so in this case, we can consider several cases, but let's go back to the one in the example. So in the example, what I consider is that indeed these bidders are robots. They do not acknowledge the existence of the cartel, and they just play according to the competitive equilibrium which exists. This is one of the nice features of this example. Now, suppose that they are strategic. If they are strategic, then it means that they are aware of the ring, and they know that if the ring exists, and they know that, if they are rational, then they are facing basically one strong bidder. That strong bidder has superior information. But then we are in an asymmetric auction. There is a strong bidder and a weak bidder. And what happens in equilibrium with asymmetric bidders? The weak bidder will get a bit more aggressively. This is what we learn from auction literature. So what I expect is that it also means that the outsider will be more tough. This results in outsider bids, hence that reducing the pay of the ring, which is making collusion more difficult.
Right, but can I just follow up by asking again my second question? So, is it important or not in our context to make all players, all bidders, formal players in the game or not? Then, because you have speculated about the situation in which we do allow them to behave strategically. But my second question was, do you think it's important to do this analysis or not?
I think it's important. This is what I would expect. On the other hand, if an outsider is aware of the ring, that outsider should be a whistleblower. If I'm a bidder, my best interest is to report it to the authorities. So what I would expect is that this is a relevant theoretical question, but I don't think that in practice it's an actual realistic assumption that the outsider is rational in this sense. If it is, then the authorities will interfere and there is no ring.
Next question for Professor Potters.
Yes, so I'd like you to speculate a bit on the possibility that, on the case that cartels are illegal. So in your experiment they're legal, there's no cost of entering the knockout auction.
Ora est.
The session is adjourned for deliberation. Please wait for the committee to return. Dear candidate, the doctorate board of Tilburg University has taken note of your dissertation. Having heard your defense, the doctorate board has decided to confer on you the doctoral degree. Professor Nasser is authorized to invest you with this dignity.
It gives me great pleasure to accept the task assigned to me by the Rector Magnificus of the university. By virtue of the authority granted to us by the law and the regulations of the university, in accordance with a decision by the Doctorate Board of Tilburg University, I hereby promote you, Eula Saris, to doctor. You hereby acquire all the rights that by law or by custom are or will be attached to the doctorate. Apart from rights, a doctorate also comes with obligations. These, first of all, include the execution of research and other scholarly activities with the utmost integrity. The privilege of being a doctor also entails that society needs to be able to rely on the sound and independent judgment of those holding a doctorate. And as proof of your promotion to doctor, I hand you the certificate, as I've just done, signed by the Rector Magnificus and your supervisors, and reaffirmed by the seal of the university. So let me.
On behalf of the doctorate board of the university on the dignity acquired. And now give the floor to Professor Bonen for his applaudatory address. Please be seated.
Dear young doctor, dear Eula, congratulations. You have your PhD now. And here ends a journey that started, I think, more than 4 years ago, when we first met in the research master class, Advanced Industrial Organization. In this class, we look at papers that deal with bargaining externalities. And many students find this quite demanding from a technical or theoretical point of view. But you were always looking at me sort of with a, well, not with a smile, but with clear eyes and nodding when I went along. And if you didn't nod, you usually had a question or I made a mistake or something. So I think that was, this is my first memory of you, and it's actually a very good one. And although we didn't do any auction papers during that class, you still read them, and you were particularly interested in auction papers where there was both common and private values. And then you were interested in the fact of how this would affect collusion. And this became the theme, first of your research master thesis, and then also of your PhD. So the technical problem, when you model collusion with both private and common values, is that you need 2 private values, 2 common values. So you have 4 times 3 is 12 incentive compatibility constraints. Yeah, so that's a lot of constraints to keep track of. And the breakthrough actually came when you realized, by going over all these 12 cases, they could be reduced to 1 inequality. And this gave you a condition under which collusion can actually happen in these type of auctions. So you could actually characterize the situations under which collusion was more or less likely if you had an auction of that kind, and you could pinpoint the effect of information sharing. Yeah, so in practice, information sharing is a big deal. Yeah, so it's one of the things that competition authorities look at. But theoretically speaking, we have actually, it's very hard for us to understand why information sharing itself is so important. Yeah, but in your model, actually, this happens quite naturally. Firms want to share information, and it leads to a bad outcome. So then together with Charles, we also developed an experiment to look at the effects of collusion in this setup on efficiency. And although, of course, we all know that collusion reduces prices in a selling market or increases them in an auction, if you're bidding for a procurement, we didn't know the effect exactly on efficiency. And you show actually it's not so easy. Yeah? So the effect on efficiency of collusion in these type of models is not so clear-cut. Now, the work that you've done over these past years have led to 3, I think, fine papers. And these papers you have presented at lots of different places. I don't think I ever had a PhD student who presented his work so often as you did. I think each year in Tilburg you gave at least 3 presentations, and then you went sort of around the world to present these things as well. So for instance, you visited Toulouse for a semester, and we're grateful to Patrick Ray for the hospitality of Toulouse during your visit. And although you did a great job working on your thesis, this doesn't actually mean that things went all that smoothly over the past couple of years. Yeah, so let me give 2 examples of things that happened, setbacks, that you coped with actually in a very impressive way. So the first one actually, at some point you started to have some health issues during your PhD years, and thankfully nothing serious was going on, except that you shouldn't be at the computer screen too long. So you didn't panic, you simply changed your ways. So you made sure that you still worked hard, probably too hard, but not at the computer screen. Yeah, so you changed the way you workflow, and you managed to keep on going and not get any delay, although you had these problems. And the second thing is that although you have a great position now in Berlin, actually the job market didn't go that smoothly. So for a long time you didn't have anything. Again, you didn't panic. You simply went on, looked for opportunities, and finally you actually had a number of offers you could choose from. And I think Berlin has been a great choice and an excellent outcome. So for many people, the important theme of your thesis, this idea of private and common values, is a bit abstract. Yeah, so people find it sort of hard to understand and a bit technical. But if you apply it to people, I think it becomes sort of a lot easier. So let's apply it to you. So for instance, where your sense of humor is concerned, I like it a lot, but I actually know this is a private value. Yeah, so I know of other, I'm aware of other examples. Yeah, but other aspects of you, for instance, your interest in mathematics, the fact that you always want to understand things better, or in particular, your knowledge of languages, I think it's a common value. Yeah, so it's something that everybody can appreciate. Yes, to illustrate, your homepage is in 4 different languages, where most people actually only have 1. And I guess, this, your likeness of languages and the fact that you actually, as a foreign PhD student, actively try to learn Dutch, which most actually, don't do, shows that you have, an appreciation of different cultures. You like languages, you like to understand different cultures, and I guess, this is something that currently in Europe we're sort of missing, both in my country, also in yours, apparently also in the UK, as we noticed last week. So I think in that sense, you're setting an example, for all of us, of how to deal with different cultures within one Europe or in one world. So as you write the introduction to your thesis, the biggest compliment I can give you is to say, well done. So, well done.
This brings us to the end of the academic session. You now can congratulate Dr. Serres during a reception. May I ask you to leave the auditorium after the cortege, row by row, starting with the family and guests on the first row. I now close this session. May I please invite you to stand up. May we be filled with the breath of life, which will guide us towards the wisdom and knowledge to heal that which seems incurable, to accomplish that which seems impossible. This session is closed.